Good morning, boys and girls. It's the 8th of October now, 10:30, and it is 28 hours since this unprecedented, murderous attack by Hamas terrorists on Israel. And all of Israel, south of Tel Aviv, along the coastal plain, around the border of Gaza, as far as Beersheba in the north, Negev, are and have been under fire in, as I said, an unprecedented attack by Hamas terrorists. Since yesterday morning at 6:30 in the morning, when a barrage of rockets, Qassam rockets and missiles and also mortar fire started in southwestern Israel around the Gaza border, till now we have had nearly 3,000 missiles and mortars, rockets fired at Israel within the first 24 hours, as well as the missile barrage. For the first time in the history of Israel, there has been a massive ground attack by Hamas terrorists. They broke through the border fence in about 25 different locations, and they came in thousands of Gazans jubilant to attack Israeli citizens in nearby locations. This is a complete different scenario, although it also reminds me of 50 years ago with the intelligence failure of the Israel IDF and the different units of the Yom Kippur War in 1973. In 1973, we were attacked by regular armies of Egypt and Syria against the Israel Defense Force. In this particular case, this is the first time in Israel's history that there has been such a massive terrorist attack directed completely at Israeli civilians, not at military targets. And so far, we estimate in the first 28 hours, there have been 350 Israeli civilians, mainly civilians, also about 25 soldiers, and also some overseas foreign workers from Thailand, but mainly Israeli civilians. 350 Israeli civilians murdered in cold blood by the terrorists. We have about somewhere in the region of 1,800 injured and wounded people now hospitalized. Quite a few of them, tens, are in critical conditions. As I already mentioned in previous episodes of this channel, the historical role of Kibbutzim has always been settlement and defense. And this is why in this particular, it's not just infiltration, it's a war with terrorists, initiated by terrorists against civilian citizens of Israel. This is why the Kibbutzim have now, together with the town of Sderot, which is about 5 miles from the border, the Kibbutzim have now taken the brunt of this murderous attack. Kibbutz Zikim, Yad Mordechai, Nirim, Nir Oz, Nachal Oz, Be'eri, Kfar Aza, Re'im, Kerem Shalom, Mefalsim, Saad, Alumim, Erez, Karmia, Givim, Kisufim, Ein HaShlosha, Magen, Nir Yitzchak, Sufa, and maybe one or two others that I've left out, have all been attacked by the Hamas terrorists on the ground and through missile attack. This is unbelievable. It was a failure in our military intelligence, comparable in one way to the Yom Kippur War attack in 1973, but unlike that attack, this was initiated by gangs of murderous terrorists aimed at killing Israelis and at taking hostages. Let's look particularly at 3 kibbutzim that have been directly affected by this ground attack. First of all, Kibbutz Nir Im. In Kibbutz Nir Im, terrorists came into the kibbutz, went from house to house looking for people in the kibbutz to murder and to take hostage. On the Israeli television, which I'm looking at now, there have been updates day and night, all of the time, continuous news broadcasts. And one in particular showed how in Kibbutz Nir Im, a guy called Yoni Asher, his wife and 2 small children, infants, had come to visit his mother-in-law in Kibbutz Nir Im. His wife and her 2 babies, one 1-year-old and one almost 3 years old, the 2 daughters, were taken hostage by Hamas terrorists, and they were filmed being taken hostage, and Hamas news media has uploaded videos of this. They are now in the Gaza Strip. It seems as though they are somewhere near the town of Khan Yunis, and they are being held as hostage with, it seems, we don't know, it's not an exact number, but it seems about at least 100 other hostages, civilians, all civilians, maybe a few soldiers as well. And the Hamas terrorists are obviously going to use them as bargaining chips. Now this has reminded me of what happened, I think it was about 10 years ago already, maybe 8 years ago, with the position of a young 19-year-old soldier, Gilad Shalit, who was in a tank unit on the Gaza border and was captured and taken hostage and held hostage for 5 or 6 years, I can't remember. We eventually did a deal with Hamas via a third-party intermediary, probably Egypt, in which Gilad Shalit was exchanged for somewhere in the region of about 1,000 Hamas imprisoned terrorists here in Israel. Now, what's going to happen in this situation with tens of Israeli hostages now held in Gaza? We do not know. The story is going to unfold, and based on what happened with Gilad Shalit, I think this is going to take, it's very sad to say this, a number of weeks and maybe, sadly, even months until something is worked out to release those hostages and bring them home to their families. This is a terrible situation. Hostages were taken from, I think, Sderot, the town, as well as Kibbutzim. I haven't heard of hostages being taken from Moshavim, but I do know that hostages were taken from Kibbutz Nirim. Now, this is a completely unknown, a new scenario for the Israeli government in all, and the different governments in all of the 75 years of Israel's existence to deal with. Let's look at another kibbutz, Kibbutz Be'eri, also very close to the Gaza border. The terrorists came in hundreds. They came in by foot. They came in motorized vehicles, flatbacks with heavy machine guns on them, and armed to the teeth. They came in by ultralight planes. They may have even come in through some tunnels. But somewhere in the region of 25 locations of the fence were broken down and then destroyed within a few hours, some of them by heavy Gazan bulldozers. And these Hamas terrorists came into Kibbutz Be'eri and gathered together somewhere in the region of 50 or 60, I'm not sure, hostages in Kibbutz Be'eri dining room. It was only this morning that somehow those hostages were rescued by the Israel Defense Force. I have no details at the moment. I'm glancing at the TV screen, and again it announces at least 350 people murdered, 1,800 injured. Apart from Kibbutz Be'eri, also in the ground attack, there was a big open-air nature party, overnight party near Kibbutz Re'im, and hundreds of teenagers and kids in their early 20s suddenly they found themselves surrounded by terrorists, individual terrorists, and they were hearing gunfire, and these partygoers had to scramble and run away in the undergrowth and in the sand dunes and hide in hollows. And we've had stories up on the newscasts of these kids who hid for hour after hour, up to I think maybe 12 hours, in the undergrowth and the scrub to hide themselves from terrorists who were all over the place, just finding anyone they could to shoot and murder on the spot. All over that district, the terrorists were stopping cars on the road and murdering people in cold blood. There's no justification whatsoever for the way these barbarians behaved in cold blood against Israeli citizens. So as this situation unfolds, there are various scenarios that can suddenly develop in the bat of an eye. So far, the Hamas terrorist attack has not initiated any uprising and intifada on the West Bank. I think that's because the West Bank still, in one way or another, is controlled by al-Fatah and not by Hamas, although there is a rising influence of the Hamas and the jihad, the Islamic jihad there. But at the moment, it's still al-Fatah as, let's call it, a moderate approach, who will not allow this type of uprising to start again. However, we are looking at the Lebanese border now. This morning, Hezbollah, under that lunatic Nasrallah, who is a fundamentalist and very much has his ego to display to the rest of the Arab world, they have started a little bit of shelling on the Lebanese border. In other words, with our response, this part of Israel in the north, with the Kibbutzim and the Moshavim and Kiryat Shmona and the town of Shlomi and Nahariya, this could flare up at any moment. We'll have to wait and see what happens. So what is Israel's response going to be? Well, first and foremost, we have to find a way to return the hostages. This is going to be a very difficult and complex process that may take weeks, that may take months, and I think particularly of Kibbutz Nirim and the very, very obviously distraught husband whose wife and two little babies taken as hostages in Kibbutz Nirim, and I don't know how many others members of Kibbutz Nirim have been taken by the Hamas terrorists, because this includes civilians of all ages. We are talking about grandparents, veteran members, adults, kids, babies. I don't know how many have been taken hostage from Kibbutz Nirim. I don't know if any were removed from Kibbutz Be'eri, from the group that were held in the dining room. I don't know how many citizens of Israel from Sderot and different areas caught on the roads in Israel have been taken hostage. I don't know how long this is going to take. But in the long run, since this is completely unprecedented in Israel's history, the Israel Defense Force and the government are going to look at this. Well, they're already looking at this. This is a complete game changer. The title of this unplanned episode is Israel's 9/11, Kibbutzim on the front line. But this has never happened before with such a widespread, intensive, murderous attack, which has been obviously planned for months by the Hamas, who until yesterday morning at 6:30 were relatively quiet for a few months, and they even stopped the Islamic Jihad from rocketing Israel. Remember that this rocketing attack of Israel has been going on since Ehud Olmert, as Prime Minister, withdrew Israeli citizens from the Gaza Strip 18 years ago. And what was their response then? We withdrew from the Gaza Strip. You can even call it Western Palestine de facto. As we withdrew, and since then, they have been sending over missile attacks and building tunnels, which have mostly been blocked up now. But the terrorist organization Hamas is a terrorist state now of Western Palestine with its own army. So the Israeli government have to decide. It's a very, very hard and complex issue to deal with. How we are going to respond, because the response will not be proportionate. This is not a game of tennis. So for all those liberal people abroad who are waiting for Israel's response, I will say to them, it's life or death with us. And the situation is Israel's 9/11. If we look at the size of Israel with 9 million population and 350 people murdered, in comparison to 9/11 in the United States, where a total of maybe just under 3,000 were murdered, this is far more than the ratio of murdered to civilian population in the United States. It's probably comparable to perhaps maybe even 20,000 dead on an American scale. So our response is not going to be the normal response of a military operation. This is war, this is life and death, and the government is going to consider how to completely obliterate and destroy the Hamas government of Western Palestine in the Gaza Strip. So that's my take. I want to finish by saying all of those kibbutzim that I mentioned surrounding the Gaza border, Zikim, Nir Oz, Kfar Aza, Re'im, and many others, please let your people know abroad, your friends, your family, your former volunteers, about this episode. And I particularly want any of the kibbutzim that I have mentioned. I'll just read it out again. Zikim, Yad Mordechai, Nirim, Nir Oz, Nachal Oz, Be'eri, Kfar Aza, Re'im, Kerem Shalom, Mefalsim, Sa'ad, Alumim, Erez, Karmia, Giv'im, Kisofim, Ein Hashlosha, Magan, Nir Yitzchak, and Sufa. I would like those kibbutzim to invite me to go and visit now, as soon as possible, to interview people, members there, so that they can tell their friends and relatives and former volunteers abroad that they are safe, and say hello to the people, and for people abroad to see them alive and healthy. It's very important, this personal contact and update. I perhaps will do another upload of an episode to update you in a few days' time, hopefully when at least on our side of the border things have calmed down. Keep well, keep safe, and keep watching this channel. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe. YouTube will inform you of the next episode, and share this episode with as many of your friends as possible on your media. Thank you. Shalom and lehitraot. Bye. See you later.